Commander ZY-Drac, his frame a tapestry of chitin and slender, pale muscle, stretched his elongated arms, feeling the deep, familiar bass thrum of the ship's living hull resonating through the bioluminescent deck plating. The devouring light, a bioengineered leviathan of the Hegemony fleet, did not merely travel, but existed as it pulsed gently through the void, its immense organic engines breathing in the cold, hard vacuum of cosmic radiation and transducing that stellar energy into directed sublight movement. 11 other ships of the Hegemony, vessels of wet, mutable tissue, shifted in perfect, silent formation, their biological carapaces gleaming with an unsettling, amniotic sheen. Another empty sector, Subcommander Grokar grated from his position, where he was rooted to the pulsating, fibrous nerve cluster that served as the primary command interface. His 6 clustered, multifaceted eyes, usually alight with predatory focus, flickered with an almost unbearable ennui as he monitored the esoteric biosensors. 3 cycles, an eternity in this sluggish patrol, had passed without contact. The rim worlds grew quiet. ZY-Drac shifted his weight, his sharp, articulate mandibles clicking rhythmically with palpable, if mild, annoyance. For 3 millennia, the Hegemony had exerted its tyrannical, absolute authority over this entire spiral arm, its influence seeping across the gulfs of space like a virulent biological stain. Their bioships were not constructions of steel and solder, but works of predatory art and sublime terror, meticulously grown in vast, living nurseries to be alive rather than merely mechanical. Each vessel was a refined, exquisite predator designed to hunt, corner, and kill with a terrifying, calculated brutality. The mere emergence of a Hegemony fleet from the dark had been sufficient to compel entire star systems to immediate, abject surrender, often before a single plasma organism was launched. But the outer rim had lately become sterile. Too many worlds had already been harvested. Too many lesser species had learned the wisdom of immediate submission to their organic warships. ZY-Drac missed the old, visceral days when enemies possessed the courage to offer a fight. Commander, Grokar's voice abruptly cut through the meditative hum, carrying a sharp, distinct note of interest for the first time in several protracted cycles. I detect something highly unusual. Grid 77 Alpha. Commander ZY-Drac crossed the deck to the viewing membrane, a shimmering, transparent section of the ship's biological hull that could reorganize its tissue to focus with the acuity of a massive, living eye. The star field swung violently as the devouring light shifted its enormous bulk, directing its biological array toward the specified coordinates. Initially, he perceived nothing but the cold, expected panorama of empty space and impossibly distant stars. Then the deep scan sensors found it. By the great void, ZY-Drac whispered, a tremor running through his throat sac. What in the dark is that thing? The object that resolved on their tactical displays immediately defied any attempt at easy, logical classification. It was staggering in its size, easily 3 times the volumetric mass of their largest, Dreadnought-class biocruiser. But whereas the Hegemony ships flowed with unsettling organic curves and soft, pulsing bioluminescence, this interloper was a brutal construction of mathematically pure angles and monolithic, hard edges. It appeared to be a mountain of synthetic alloy, oppressively covered in impenetrable metal plates and weapon ports that dotted its surface like unblinking eyes. It appears unquestionably artificial, Grokar reported, his multiple voices uncertain, the smooth flow of his command language momentarily fractured. The construction methodologies are wholly unknown, possessing none of the signature energy decay patterns of stellar manufacture. More critically, there are absolutely no biological components detected. The entire colossal structure appears, Commander, to be dead. Dead. ZY-Drac felt a profound, primal chill course through the intricate shell of his carapace. How, he processed with growing internal anxiety, could an artifact of such staggering scale be entirely and utterly lifeless, yet still maintain function and directed velocity? The sensor readings defied every known principle of Hegemony Xenotech. The vessel was a pure assembly of super-refined, synthesized metals and complex, inorganic crystalline materials. There was no living tissue, not a single strand of biofiber anywhere within its frame. Yet, it traversed the vacuum with clear, unwavering purpose, undeniably governed by some form of hostile, calculating intelligence. It was exactly like discovering a colossal, thinking corpse that continued to walk the stars. Meanwhile, barely 3,000 kilometers distant, Captain Jake Morrison stood rooted on the command deck of the USS Resilient and studied the real-time tactical projection with a cool, clinical professional interest. The massive human dreadnought hummed with a flawless, contained power, the sound a layered symphony of perfectly regulated fusion reactors, cryogenic superconductors, and electronic systems cycling with a mechanical precision that had become as comforting and familiar to the captain as the rhythm of his own pulse. 12 contacts, Captain, reported Lieutenant Valet Kale from the Tactical Analysis Station. Her hands moved in precise, economical motions over the luminous, three-dimensional holographic controls as the ship's massive central intelligence rapidly processed the incoming vessel signatures. Configuration is entirely unknown. They do not match any known survey or hostile contact profile in the Colonial Navy databases. Morrison simply nodded, his weathered, steady face betraying absolutely nothing of the moment's staggering, historic gravity. At 52, he was a three-decade veteran of the Colonial Navy, a man whose career had been spent policing pirates and suppressing insurgencies among the volatile outer colonies. This was different. This was first contact. This was a genuine, non-human intelligence, here in the dark. Distance to target? He asked. 4,000 kilometers and rapidly enclosing, Kale replied. Their calculated approach vector suggests absolute certainty. They are not making any attempt to evade or mask their presence. Morrison watched the alien vessels on the tactical screen, acknowledging their bizarre, biological grace. They possessed a certain terrifying beauty, like deep-sea creatures swimming with impossible fluidity through the stellar vacuum. But beauty was never a mitigating factor for danger. In the captain's long, brutal experience, the most lethal threats were almost always the most elegantly designed. Sir, Communications Officer Anya Sarin's voice reported, professional concern tightening her tone. I am detecting an active, rapid energy buildup from the lead contact. Initial analysis suggests high-yield weapon systems. Not yet identifiable, but the signature is definitively weapon-grade. Understood. Valet, provide the updated tactical assessment. Lieutenant Kale's summary was crisp, detailed, and utterly professional. 12 contacts, Captain, averaging 400 meters in length. Energy signatures are consistent with a deep biological, bioorganic construction methodology. Their offensive systems appear solely energy-based, primarily utilizing high-density plasma or sustained particle beams. Crucially, we detect absolutely no dedicated kinetic weaponry. Morrison raised a skeptical eyebrow at the display. No kinetic weapons. None at all. None, sir. It's an enormous conceptual gap in their armament. It's almost as if they have never developed, or even conceived of, a railgun or advanced missile system. That omission was deeply interesting. In Morrison's extensive military experience, any species that achieved spaceflight, a process governed by cold, inescapable physics, would inevitably develop kinetic weapons. They were simple. They were universally reliable. They were brutally effective. Energy projection systems were flashier, certainly, but they always carried thermodynamic and atmospheric limitations that kinetic systems, which utilized pure mass and velocity, elegantly bypassed. Engineering, Morrison called, directing his voice to Chief Marcus Rockstone. Status report. How are the core systems holding? All systems green, Captain, came the immediate, reassuring reply from the engine room. Core fusion reactors at full sustainable power. Gravimetric armor field systems charged and cycling. Point defense grid confirmed online. The Resilient is fully combat-ready for whatever exotic technology they attempt to deploy. Morrison allowed himself a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile. The Resilient was more than a ship, it was the crown jewel of the colonial fleet, an uncompromising testament to the hard science elegance of human engineering and strategic military thought. Where the organic alien vessels resembled grotesque, graceful sea creatures, the Resilient was precisely what its blueprints decreed, a monolithic, kinetic fortress designed, from its very core, to fight, endure, and decisively win battles in the sterile, unforgiving physics of the vacuum. Sir, Valet Kale reported, her voice regaining its earlier urgency. They are slowing their approach velocity. Tactical analysis suggests two possibilities. They intend to attempt communication, or they are closing to maximum effective range for their energy-based primary weapons. Morrison's reply was utterly devoid of tension. Either way, Lieutenant. We are ready. Anya, prepare to open a secure channel if they initiate communication. Valet, keep all weapon systems fully spooled and ready for immediate deployment, but maintain soft locks only. Let's first calculate their intent. The two radically different forces continued their closing trajectory, each vessel a perfect, singular embodiment of a completely divergent theory of space warfare. The Hegemony ships glided with a fluid, unnatural grace, their living hulls rippling with hypnotic, unsettling bioluminescent patterns that functioned simultaneously as subtle communication and profound intimidation, vessels that had subjugated hundreds of species using genetically tailored biological weaponry and generations of evolved organic technology. The human ship, conversely, moved with the unwavering, cold precision of a mechanical instrument, every servo and quantum system calibrated for maximal, mathematical efficiency. It represented humanity's first and most uncompromising commitment to a warship designed exclusively for the brutal exigencies of combat against unknown, possibly overwhelming, non-human threats. Neither side truly possessed the necessary framework to comprehend the scale of power they were about to confront. Commander ZY-Drac watched the geometric human vessel grow relentlessly larger on his viewing membrane and felt the slow, creeping tendrils of something he had not truly experienced for countless cycles. Pure, tactical uncertainty. The alien ship's monolithic design violated every hegemony principle of viable space warfare. It was impossibly vast, absurdly over-armored, and possessed a clear, almost brazen design profile geared toward protracted, high-attrition combat. Commander, Grokar whispered, the suggestion bordering on the unthinkable. Perhaps we should consider requesting immediate reinforcements. ZY-Drac's mandibles clicked rapidly in a percussive sound that approximated hegemony laughter. 12 biocruisers against a single, unfamiliar alien vessel? What manner of inept commander would I be to demand assistance against such laughable odds? Yet even as he voiced the dismissal, something cold and profound in his genetic memory structure pulsed a deep, resonant warning. This, he knew with sudden, chilling clarity, would not be anything like their previous conquests. The two forces continued their inevitable closing maneuver, neither knowing that this moment would irrevocably fracture and redefine the delicate, ancient balance of power across their entire sector of the galaxy. The Hegemony fleet instinctively flowed into its traditional attack formation with seamless, practiced ease. The 12 biocruisers rapidly spread out in a terrifying, liquid pattern that precisely mimicked a hunting pack of enormous, spacefaring predators. Each hull pulsed with an intimidating cascade of shifting, vibrant colors, generating a mesmerizing, terrifying light show that had been the herald of doom for innumerable worlds across the galaxy. Commander ZY-Drac felt the familiar, biological rush of anticipation as his fleet prepared for what protocol dictated should be a trivial conquest. The Devouring Light and her sister ships had executed this cold, ritualized dance hundreds of times. Intimidation first. Then the demand for absolute surrender. Finally, either complete submission or a brief, violent, one-sided slaughter. Weapon organisms are fully charging, Grokar reported, his 6 eyes gleaming with renewed, predatory excitement. Acid pods verified ready for immediate launch. Plasma feeders active. Viral spores prepared for deployment protocol. The bioweapons were creations of chilling, evolved art. Every single Hegemony ship transported living, hyper-specialized ammunition capable of melting refined steel, dissolving crystalline armor, and flooding rival systems with rapidly consuming biological agents. Initiate approach pattern, ZY-Drac commanded. Execute the standard intimidation sequence. Let the primitive humans comprehend precisely what they are facing. The alien ships began their attack run in unison, moving in the graceful, deadly spirals that had been the Hegemony's terrifying signature across the galaxy for thousands of years. Their mutable hulls began to ripple with rapidly changing, intensely threatening colors, while the specialized weapon ports opened wide like ravenous, hungry mouths. The intricate bioluminescent patterns flowed across their organic surfaces, an undeniable visual display detailing the long, bloody history of conquest and death in pure, living light. On the command deck of the USS Resilient, Captain Morrison watched the alien formation on the primary screen with a detached, professional interest. The vessels moved with an unnerving beauty, he had to concede, like a meticulously coordinated school of deep-ocean fish preparing for a synchronized, lethal strike. Interesting approach pattern, he commented calmly to Lieutenant Valet Kale. Highly coordinated. They have executed this sequence repeatedly. Valet nodded, her hands remaining perfectly steady on the complex tactical controls despite the overwhelming weight of this historical first contact engagement. It is a highly practiced, almost ritualistic maneuver, sir. Primary analysis suggests a classic containment strategy. They intend to surround and isolate us. Let them contain us, Morrison replied, his voice a pillar of calm. Anya, has there been any attempt at a handshake or communication? Communications Officer Anya Sarin shook her head. Nothing originating, sir, but I am detecting a heavy volume of tight beam activity across multiple frequencies. Likely high-speed, encrypted internal communications. Morrison meticulously studied the approaching ships with the cold, critical eye of a veteran naval strategist. Their formation, while visually impressive, possessed a single, fundamental tactical flaw. They were positioning their vessels based on the archaic, overconfident assumption that their enemy would remain static, passively waiting to accept the predetermined outcome of the Hegemony's maneuver. Valet, initiate immediate rotation, he ordered. Present the bow profile. Aye, sir. The USS Resilient began its massive rotation on the main axis, a breathtaking demonstration of high-tolerance mechanical precision. The dreadnought shifted its colossal bulk like a siege fortress in motion, coolly deciding precisely which wall of armament and armor to present to its attackers. Its movement was utterly deliberate. It was calculated. It was, fundamentally, a movement utterly devoid of biological fear. This was the defining, irreversible moment. As the human warship continued its slow, deliberate rotation, the Hegemony fleet received their first uncompromising, full-profile view of the vessel they intended to conquer. The Resilient's true scale instantly became apparent. The ship was not merely large, it was impossibly, overwhelmingly massive, a piece of industrial military geometry that dwarfed their own largest bio-cruiser like a planetary mountain range overshadows a slender stalk of kelp. But size alone was not the factor that momentarily froze the Hegemony fleet in mid-attack. It was the weapons. The Resilient's external hull was not a graceful, flowing carapace. It was covered in weapon systems, an inorganic thicket of articulated, lethal density. Triple-barrel rail gun turrets, each assembly the approximate size of a Hegemony landing structure, tracked with sublime, silent mechanical efficiency as the ship shifted its orientation. Missile launch tubes were clustered across the surface in organized groups of dozens, and the hull fairly bristled with thousands of microfocus point defense laser emitters. This single, incomprehensible vessel carried a dedicated, overwhelming kinetic firepower greater than that of many established planetary defense fleets. By the dark void, whispered Grokar, the sound almost too soft for the ship's internal acoustic dampeners to register. What manner of species, utterly divorced from biological sanity, would conceive and construct such a brutal, geometric nightmare? Yet even that overwhelming arsenal was not the sight that stopped the rhythmic pulse of alien hearts. As the Resilient completed its rotation, every single weapon system on the monolithic ship immediately locked onto a separate, distinct target. All 12 Hegemony ships suddenly found themselves simultaneously targeted by a terrifying array of weapons technology they possessed no framework to understand. Guided by active sensors that appeared to penetrate their organic hulls as if they were made of clear water, the targeting was not merely accurate, but perfect. This was not the approximately correct aiming of standard space combat. This was a mathematically absolute precision. Each multi-ton rail gun slug was aimed directly at the volumetric center of mass of its assigned target. Every missile tube was angled to instantaneously intercept the most favorable calculated evasion vector. Every energy weapon had already determined the precise, high-efficiency penetration angle needed to defeat their biological armor. In the space of 3 Hegemony heartbeats, the human vessel had achieved absolute, confirmed firing solutions for a dozen distinct targets, all moving in complex, three-dimensional patterns. The sheer magnitude of the real-time data processing required for such a feat was staggering. Even the Hegemony's most advanced, bioengineered computers required measured minutes to achieve a comparative level of precision. The Resilient had executed the process in compressed seconds. Subcommander Grokar's voice, filtered through the ship's organic comms, was laced with something the Hegemony had successfully purged from its collective consciousness for centuries: raw, existential fear. Commander, they have absolute, verified target locks on every single ship in the fleet. Every vessel. Simultaneously, ZY Drax stared at his own tactical display, his disbelief profound and absolute. The human ship's targeting overlay registered as an impenetrable, hyperdense web of interconnected vector lines, each line representing an instantaneous weapons solution capable of disabling a biocruiser with a single, perfectly placed strike. The precision was physically impossible. No known species, utilizing biological intelligence or computation, could possibly process that density of three-dimensional tactical data in real time. How? He whispered into the nerve cluster. How can one monolithic ship manage to target our entire, 12-vessel fleet? Lieutenant Valet Kale reported with pristine, professional calm from her station. All targets acquired, sir. Firing solutions locked and actively updated in real time. They have ceased all forward movement. Captain Morrison nodded, completely unsurprised by the sudden, panicked stasis. He had witnessed this profound, paralyzing shock before, though never directed at a genuine non-human entity. There was an essential, visceral terror in being perfectly targeted by weapon systems one cannot fully identify, systems that are guided by computational intelligence that processes and reacts at speeds far surpassing the conceptual limits of any biological mind. Engineering, he called to Chief Stone. Core power status. All systems nominal, Captain, came the Chief's confident voice. The fusion reactors are operating barely above absolute idle. We possess the capacity to maintain this level of peak tactical operation for measured weeks without placing any significant thermodynamic strain on the core systems. Morrison allowed himself a small, knowing smile. The Resilient's quantum computer systems, which were currently drawing less total operational power than a 21st-century Earth city, were concurrently processing gigabytes of tactical data at a rate functionally impossible for any biological intelligence to match or predict. Interconnected quantum processors and a constantly evolving tactical artificial intelligence worked in perfect, seamless concert to create a targeting system that could theoretically handle hundreds of simultaneous, moving targets without the slightest measure of computational strain. The Hegemony fleet remained suspended, motionless, in the cold vacuum. Every one of their organic ships was locked into the lethal, mathematically absolute crosshairs of weapons they could not begin to comprehend. Their once graceful attack formation had instantaneously inverted, becoming an intricate, suffocating death trap. Every possible evasive maneuver they considered was already calculated, countered, and nullified by the human ship's central AI. For the first time in 3,000 years of unparalleled galactic conquest, a Hegemony fleet had been stopped utterly cold, paralyzed by an incontrovertible display of pure, hyper-advanced technological superiority. Commander ZY Drax tried desperately to compartmentalize and process the impossible reality that was unfolding before him. His bioships were inherently living creatures, capable of profound adaptation and even real-time evolution in combat, but biological adaptation required measurable time, and evolution demanded generations. The human ship was simply faster. Its artificial, synthetic brain could think, calculate, and react at the absolute velocity of electronic processing, while his organic vessels were still physically structuring the initial sensory inputs of the encounter. Commander, one of his subcommanders urgently vocalized through the intership channel. What are your standing orders? ZY Drax stared at the geometric human vessel and was forced into the horrifying realization that he possessed no tactical orders suitable for this situation. Every single Hegemony tactical manual, every battle plan, every ingrained military strategy was predicated on the assumption of fighting a slower, less sophisticated, fundamentally biological enemy. They had never once encountered a species capable of outprocessing and outthinking them in continuous, absolute real time. The human ship waited with cold, indifferent mechanical patience while the alien fleet remained paralyzed in the void, existentially caught between the impossibility of advance and the humiliation of retreat, completely unable to process the new, terrifying reality of their situation. For 3 decades, Captain Morrison had engaged human enemies, individuals who thought and reacted according to predictable, human-centric logic. Yet he had frequently theorized precisely what would occur when humanity finally encountered an alien intelligence whose framework of thought was radically divergent. Now he had his answer. They would freeze, exactly as humans would, when confronted by a superior logic that violated every law of their experimental reality. The Resilience weapons remained rigidly locked on their respective targets, waiting for a command that Morrison devoutly hoped he would never be compelled to issue. The oppressive silence in the vacuum stretched for agonizing minutes. 12 organic alien biocruisers hung completely motionless, while one massive, hyper-efficient human warship waited with unwavering mechanical patience. On both sides of the unprecedented standoff, disparate minds struggled to assign meaning to the overpowering reality of the confrontation. Captain Morrison finally made the calculated decision to break the agonizing deadlock. He was a man who had spent 30 years in the black, and he knew intrinsically that someone had to be the first to move the tactical situation forward. In his experience, it was always exponentially better to be the entity initiating the conversation than the one desperately listening. "Anya, open a general broadcast channel to all the alien contacts," he ordered. Communications Officer Anya Sarin's fingers flew across her controls. "Channel confirmed open, sir. Broadcasting a high-definition signal across all currently detected frequencies." Morrison stepped forward to the communications nexus, his image instantly resolving on the alien viewing membranes throughout the Hegemony fleet. He was not, by most Hegemony standards, an impressive figure, a middle-aged human clad in a simple blue uniform, his graying hair cut short, his face etched deeply by decades of service in the unforgiving void. But there was an unshakable core in his calm, unhurried demeanor, a subtle yet profound resonance that communicated absolute, uncompromising confidence. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Colonial Navy," he stated, his voice clear, steady, and perfectly measured. "You are now operating within established human sovereign territory. State your immediate intentions." The human's words struck the entire alien fleet with the stunning, undeniable force of a physical kinetic impact. This was not due to any overt threat, but rather the sheer, unprecedented directness of the inquiry. There were no elaborate, pompous titles, no artistic, circuitous speeches, and absolutely none of the complex, ritualized diplomatic protocols the Hegemony had come to expect. Just a plain, simple question that demanded a concise, equally simple answer. Commander ZY Drax stared at the image of the middle-aged human on his viewing screen, his organic thought processes struggling to cope. In 3,000 years of total, unquestioned conquest, no entity had ever once presumed to demand the Hegemony explain its presence in the void. They were the Hegemony. Their very existence was the only explanation ever required. "Sub-Commander," he whispered urgently to Grokar. "What is the appropriate tactical response to such a question?" Grokar's 6 eyes blinked rapidly in systemic, fundamental confusion. "I do not possess the necessary diplomatic script, Commander. The question is logically unsound. We are the Hegemony. We simply traverse the stars where we choose." But even as the words were spoken, both aliens simultaneously realized how utterly hollow and weak that ingrained statement sounded when confronted by the human captain's startling, simple directness. The human had not questioned their identity or sought to determine the nature of their plunder. He had asked what they intended to do. It was a question that carried the chilling, implicit assumption that they still possessed a functional choice in the matter. ZY Drac instinctively drew his segmented frame up to its imposing, full height and manually activated his own communication system. When he finally spoke, his layered voice carried the brittle, hollow authority of 3 millennia of unquestioned, absolute power. "I am Commander ZY Drac of the Hegemony Fleet. We are the undisputed masters of this stellar sector. You will immediately surrender your vessel and submit entirely to our absolute, predetermined authority." The pronouncement, which had successfully conquered 100 worlds, sounded thin and utterly hollow in the vast, objective emptiness of space. On the Resilient's command deck, several human officers subtly exchanged glances, and Lieutenant Kale successfully suppressed a tiny, professional smile. Captain Morrison's subsequent response was delivered in the exact same even, measured, and completely dispassionate tone he had maintained throughout the entire engagement. "I see," Morrison acknowledged coolly. "And if we decline your offer?" That simple, logical question caught ZY utterly off guard once more. In the codified, brutal hegemony experience, demands for submission were either instantly accepted or violently answered with a desperate, self-destructive counterattack. No one had ever possessed the audacity to request a simple clarification of the potential consequences. Then, ZY replied, instinctively falling back on the most ancient hegemony threat protocol, "You will be utterly destroyed." "Understood," Morrison confirmed, the tone of his voice matching that of someone acknowledging a routine atmospheric pressure reading. "Anya, terminate the broadcast channel." The communication link was instantaneously severed, plunging the alien fleet into a stunned, absolute silence. The human captain had received their most sacred, ultimate threat, the promise of total annihilation, with the same cold, casual indifference he might direct toward a minor, irritating system malfunction. "Commander," Grokar whispered, his voice thin. He did not register even the slightest degree of concern regarding our threat. ZY was now beginning to process that this incomprehensible encounter was fundamentally unlike anything recorded in the hegemony's vast historical archives. However, he was a 3 millennia veteran commander with an undeniable reputation to defend. His ingrained training and absolute, ancestral pride mandated that he follow through on the threat of destruction. "Initiate immediate attack sequence," he ordered, his voice suddenly hard. "Deploy the primary spore clouds and ready the plasma acid launchers." The hegemony fleet burst into frenetic, organic action. Their bioships pulsed visibly with deadly, accelerated purpose as the stored weapon organisms prepared for mass expulsion. Clouds of genetically tailored, corrosive spores erupted from the launch ducts, immediately expanding into noxious, ethereal spheres of chemical death that had previously melted and consumed the hulls of innumerable enemy vessels. The spores were the hegemony's most feared and relied upon weapon. Each microscopic organism was meticulously designed to enzymatically devour any known refined material, reproducing geometrically as it consumed available matter and energy. Entire battle-class ships had been reduced to non-functional, empty shells within scant minutes of exposure. Millions of the deadly, bioluminescent organisms surged through the vacuum toward the human warship. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight. It was pure death, given a consuming, biological form, and set loose upon the stars. These bioweapons were creations of chilling, evolved art. Every single hegemony ship transported living, hyper-specialized ammunition capable of melting refined steel, dissolving crystalline armor, and flooding rival systems with rapidly consuming biological agents. On the Resilient's command deck, the hard science sensors instantly acquired and processed the inbound spore cloud. Chief Marcus Rockstone's voice came over the internal comms from the central engineering section. "Captain, I am reading an extremely high density of unclassified biological material rapidly approaching our position. Signatures are consistent with microscopic, energy-consuming organisms." Morrison nodded calmly. "Initiate standard defensive countermeasures, Chief." "Already on it, sir," came the confident reply. "The multi-frequency point defense grid is actively tracking the density cloud." What occurred next was a demonstration of hyper-advanced physics that would be debated and disbelieved across alien military academies for centuries. The Resilient's automated point defense grid activated with absolute, flawless mechanical precision. Hundreds of miniaturized, high-yield laser arrays emerged from recessed, hidden ports across the ship's monolithic hull. Each laser was designed to generate and focus coherent energy for the sole purpose of intercepting supersonic debris and incoming kinetic projectiles. Human military engineering had created these systems for surgical, relativistic accuracy. The entire grid began firing in a rapid, continuous staccato of micropulses, each beam lasting only a fraction of a millisecond. To a human observer, it was a beautiful, ethereal light show, tiny, coherent flashes sparking across the vast gulf between the ships. To the approaching alien spores, it was targeted, systematic extinction. Every laser pulse struck and instantly destroyed thousands of the consuming microscopic organisms. The quantum computer systems controlling the defense grid calculated the exact frequency and energy required to disrupt the specific biological processes of the spores, then delivered that energy with surgical, absolute precision. In a measured period of less than 30 seconds, millions of the deadly, consuming organisms were reduced to harmless, inert compounds of carbon floating inertly in the vacuum. The most feared, most devastating weapon in the Hegemony's ancient arsenal had been completely neutralized by what the humans considered standard, low-tier defensive systems. The alien fleet watched with a growing, profound horror as their ultimate weapon simply vanished, eliminated by a physics and technology they had never encountered, operating at computational speeds they could not possibly match. Impossible, breathed Grokar, his collective eyes wide with systemic error. The spores are designed to consume all known matter. They have previously reduced entire battle fleets to dust. But Commander ZY was, in that chilling moment, beginning to process a terrible, cold, hard truth. The spores could indeed consume anything the Hegemony had successfully catalogued and weaponized. But the humans had constructed their monumental vessel from materials and utilized engineering principles that the aliens had never, in their entire 3 millennia history, even remotely encountered. On the Resilient, Chief Stone reported the results with clear, professional satisfaction. Threat neutralized, Captain. The point defense protocol executed perfectly. Should I, at this stage, be concerned about this biological debris? Morrison looked first at the tactical display, which showed the now inert residue of the failed alien assault, and then directed his gaze toward the frozen, defeated Hegemony fleet on his main screen. His response was then automatically routed and transmitted to the alien vessels through the deliberately left open monitoring channel. Was that, Commander, intended to be an attack? The question hung in the deep black like a colossal, physical weight pressing down on the organic hulls. The Hegemony had just unleashed its most terrifying, sector-conquering biological weapon, and the human captain was casually inquiring if the gesture even qualified as an act of war. Commander ZY felt the sudden, paralyzing certainty that he was utterly, fundamentally out of his depth. These humans did not merely possess superior kinetics or harder armor. They operated on an entirely different conceptual plane of strategic warfare, a plane that rendered all Hegemony tactics equivalent to the pointless, simple skirmishes of children. The bioships hung static in the void, their commanders desperately struggling to incorporate the impossible sensory data they had just witnessed. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Hegemony attack had been casually, professionally dismissed as tactically inadequate, and the monolithic human ship waited with mechanical, unwavering patience for their next inevitable failure. Its colossal weapons remained perfectly locked on target. Its crew was calmly, ready for whatever exotic biological mechanism the aliens might fruitlessly attempt next. The balance of power in this entire spiral arm had just shifted irrevocably, and only one species fully understood the cosmic scale of the event. The communication channel, by deliberate design, remained open between the hyper-advanced human ship and the stunned alien fleet. What followed next was not the ritualized exchange of hollow threats and predictable demands that characterized most first-contact scenarios. Instead, it instantly devolved into something far more psychologically devastating for the Hegemony, a casual, completely unconcerned conversation that slowly, relentlessly revealed the true, terrifying scope of the technological chasm they had just stumbled into. Commander ZY, still mentally reeling from the absolute, crushing failure of his signature spore attack, attempted a desperate, immediate reclamation of control over the untenable situation. His ancient pride and the psychological weight of 3 millennia of Hegemony dominance demanded that he project absolute strength, even when facing an enemy that was functionally impossible. "Human vessel," he transmitted, his voice carrying a labored, forced authority. "You have witnessed only a theoretical fraction of our true power. Surrender to us now, and the cessation of your life will be swift." Captain Morrison's response was immediate and retained the same core of unwavering, conversational calm he had maintained since first contact. "Anya, are you ensuring we get fully detailed, comprehensive recordings of all incoming data?" Naval Command is going to demand forensic-level reports on these exotic materials. The casual, internal comment reached the alien fleet through the deliberate leak in the channel. The stunning implications of the transmission struck the Hegemony commanders with the force of a sudden, systemic psychological shock. The human captain was not treating this confrontation as a desperate, epoch-defining struggle for survival. He was treating it as a mundane, low-priority patrol encounter that would merely necessitate the filing of tiresome bureaucratic paperwork upon his return to base. "Sir," came Lieutenant Valet Kale's crisp, analytical voice over the channel. "Based on their current attack formation and limited weapon signatures, these appear to be standard Hegemony patrol vessels. Our initial intelligence assessment suggests their established tactics rely heavily on biological warfare and particle-based energy weapons. Our multilayered gravimetric and composite kinetic barriers are calculated to be completely and passively effective against anything they are capable of deploying." The detailed, professional analysis reached alien organic auditory sensors with a devastating, undeniable clarity. The human tactical officer had merely observed their exotic vessels for a few minutes and already possessed a calculated understanding of their capabilities that surpassed the intuition of many Hegemony commanders regarding their own bioships. But the ultimate horror was the casual, scientific dismissal of weapons that had successfully conquered entire star systems. Completely effective did not merely imply confidence. It was a pure, mathematical certainty that nothing the Hegemony was capable of deploying would even scratch the Resilient's hull. Subcommander Grokar leaned close to ZY-Drac, his multiple eyes wide with panic. "Commander, they communicate with the ease of routine, as if this confrontation with our entire fleet is an expected, common event. As if they have faced vessels precisely like ours before." "Impossible," ZY-Drac immediately replied, but the sound of the word utterly lacked its required conviction. "We are the only established, spacefaring power in this entire stellar sector." On the Resilience command deck, Communications Officer Anya Sarin looked up from her advanced console with professional curiosity. "Captain, I am actively intercepting their primary internal communications flow. They are not utilizing any advanced signal encryption protocol. Should I run a real-time semantic translation?" Morrison nodded. "Put the translation on open speaker. Let's determine their current operational mindset." The layered alien voices immediately filled the bridge, automatically translated and synthesized by the ship's massive computer core. The human personnel listened with cool, detached amazement as the Hegemony commanders unwittingly revealed the full measure of their tactical confusion and their rapidly intensifying, systemic fear. "How many vessels do they actually deploy?" one alien voice frantically inquired. "This geometrically complex monstrosity cannot possibly be the entirety of their battle fleet." Another voice replied with strained logic, "No intelligent species sends a single vessel to face the Hegemony. But if this truly is only one ship, then where, in the name of the Dark Void, are the others?" Lieutenant Valet Kale looked toward her captain with a flicker of genuine surprise. "Sir, they have interpreted our single vessel as the advanced scout for an exponentially larger fleet formation." Morrison processed the information quickly. The aliens had committed 12 vessels to investigate a potential contact signature in what they believed was empty space. This indicated either a profound, inherited confidence or an operational stupidity that defied belief. Given their current, paralyzed reaction to the Resilient, he was forced to conclude the former was more likely. "Chief Stone," Morrison called directly to engineering, ensuring his voice was clear and perfectly audible across the still-open channel. "What is our current status on the latest field trial weapon systems? Command is eagerly awaiting preliminary field testing data." The chief's voice came back with palpable, cheerful professionalism. "All systems green, Captain. The newly installed kinetic railguns are performing flawlessly on diagnostics. Reactor output is entirely steady. We could maintain this level of absolute combat readiness for weeks in continuous rotation without placing any noticeable strain on the core systems." The conversation, which was still deliberately being transmitted in real time to the paralyzed alien fleet, struck the Hegemony collective consciousness like a series of continuous kinetic hammer blows. The humans were not merely unafraid. They were profoundly, scientifically disappointed. They had clearly traveled across the immense gulf of the void hoping for a genuinely challenging, meaningful field test of their advanced weaponry. And 12 Hegemony battle cruisers were apparently not even close to being sufficient to provide them with meaningful data. Commander ZY felt the foundation of his entire tactical and existential reality dissolving around him. These incomprehensible humans spoke of his fleet, 12 powerful biocruisers that had conquered dozens of worlds, as if the entire encounter were merely a minor, scheduled training exercise. Anya, Morrison continued, projecting the next calculated dose of intelligence. Initiate a high-priority message uplink to Admiral Chen. Inform her that we have established definitive first contact with local alien entities. Current tactical threat assessment is definitively minimal. Request instructions for the next phase of the exploration mission. The broadcast message, automatically translated, reached alien organic sensors and was immediately distributed throughout the Hegemony fleet. The effect was both immediate and devastating. Admiral Chen. The reference to an Admiral Chen implied the existence of a command structure, which inherently meant there were far more human ships, many more. And this massive, impossibly advanced warship was only a single, disposable vessel in a fleet vast enough to necessitate the appointment of a ranking admiral. Subcommander Grokkar's voice was reduced to a horrified, barely audible whisper. If this single warship requires an admiral to oversee the fleet it belongs to, Commander, what is the incomprehensible scale of the total human deployment? ZY possessed no functioning answer. In Hegemony military protocol, admirals commanded fleet formations numbering in the high hundreds of major vessels. If the humans adhered to even vaguely similar organizational structures, they possessed a mobilized, operational fleet that dwarfed, annihilated, and made irrelevant anything the Hegemony had ever assembled or commanded. The open communication channel suddenly crackled to life as another, entirely new voice joined the seemingly casual, internal conversation from the human ship. Captain Morrison, this is Jax Theron in sensor analysis. I am reading genuinely interesting, highly unusual energy consumption patterns emanating from the alien vessels. Their core power systems appear to be entirely biological in their complex nature. I have never encountered a thermodynamic signature that resembles this. Understood, Theron, Morrison replied. Ensure the complete data package is added to your report. The dedicated science teams back at the core worlds will undoubtedly be fascinated by the exotic methodology. Science teams. The devastating realization sank into the Hegemony consciousness. The humans did not merely possess overwhelming military power. They possessed dedicated, extensive science teams that studied alien technology. They were not simply crude warriors, they were systematic researchers, relentless explorers, a species that approached the novelty of the void with cold, systematic curiosity rather than immediate, predictable destruction. But what ultimately reduced the aliens to a profound, existential terror was the utterly dispassionate tone of the conversations. The humans were not excited by the prospect of first contact with a sophisticated alien species. They were not awed or even threatened by the Hegemony's unique, evolved organic technology. They were merely mildly interested, possessing the detached curiosity a microbiologist might exhibit upon discovering a slightly novel strain of terrestrial bacteria. Captain, Valet Kale reported, her voice tightening slightly. I am registering distinct, unusual energy spikes from the alien weapon systems. Diagnostics suggest they are rapidly charging for another full-scale attack sequence. Morrison sighed, a deliberate, audible sound that carried with perfect clarity across the open channel. Well, I suppose they are logically compelled to try again. It is likely mandated by their doctrinal military protocols. Valet, ensure all defensive systems are at peak readiness. I truly do not wish to spend the next 2 weeks generating reports to explain marginal battle damage to the repair crews. The casual, profound dismissal of an impending, full-scale attack from the combined firepower of 12 Hegemony warships struck the alien fleet with the finality of a physical, stunning blow. The human captain was demonstrably not bracing for a desperate, life-or-death battle. He was simply irritated by the sheer bureaucratic inconvenience of having to file routine damage assessment reports. Commander ZY stared fixedly at his tactical display and finally realized that everything he had held to be absolute truth, about the nature of warfare, about the structure of power, and about the hegemony's immutable place in the cosmos, was fundamentally wrong. These humans did not register his entire fleet as a tactical threat. They saw it as an operational inconvenience. All ships, he transmitted desperately to his fleet on a secure, closed channel. Hold position immediately. Cease all attack preparations. We must initiate a complete, immediate reassessment of this tactical situation. But even as the command was issued, ZY-Drac knew, with cold, terminal clarity, that no amount of subsequent reassessment would alter the single, fundamental truth he now faced. The Hegemony had encountered a species that was not merely physically stronger or better armed than they were. It was a species that operated on a completely different, unassailable echelon of warfare, technological development, and cold, calculating thought. And that species was apparently so utterly confident in its overwhelming superiority that it dispatched single vessels to conduct exploratory missions into territory the Hegemony considered its inviolable domain. The galaxy had just become an infinitely more dangerous, profoundly complex place, and the Hegemony was, for the first time in millennia, undeniably no longer at the apex of the food chain. The static, profound standoff continued for another long, measured hour. 12 organic alien bio-cruisers remained motionless in the void, their captains paralyzed, while the massive human warship waited with mechanical, unwavering patience. On the Hegemony side, commanders weighed tactical options and found every single one fundamentally wanting. Captain Morrison, conversely, had spent the time reviewing accumulated alien intelligence and consulting with his senior staff. The aliens had not renewed their attack after the total failure of the spore assault, which, to the human mind, suggested they possessed a capacity for learning. That was an encouraging development. It meant they might ultimately be capable of utilizing reason. "Valet," he said, breaking the long silence with a decisive tone. "What is your final assessment of their current tactical status?" Lieutenant Valet Kale meticulously studied the readouts on her tactical display before delivering her conclusion. "They are maintaining a rigid defensive formation but have ceased all weapon charging protocols. Core power levels indicate they are running standard, low-combat operational procedures. I submit that they are actively waiting to observe our next decisive action." Morrison nodded his agreement. In his experience, stasis was almost always a hopeful sign. Enemies who possessed the genuine desire to fight did not remain static, waiting patiently for diplomatic channels to open. Enemies who simply waited were typically searching for a rational, immediate avenue to avoid being destroyed. Anya, open a dedicated communication channel to their lead vessel. The digital communication link immediately activated, and once more Captain Morrison's calm image resolved on the alien viewing screens throughout the Hegemony fleet. This time, however, the content of his message carried a very different, final authority. "Commander ZY-Drac," Morrison stated, utilizing the alien's rank and designation with a cold, almost surgical familiarity. "I have been conducting a full analysis of our present situation. You traversed the void with 12 vessels, expecting to locate and claim an empty, undefended sector. Instead, you encountered us. I must assume that this development has created a significant, possibly critical, failure in your mission planning parameters." The immediate, direct acknowledgement of their catastrophic tactical miscalculation caught ZY-Drac entirely off guard. In his 3 millennia experience, enemies either delivered grand, desperate threats or attempted to beg for immediate, temporary clemency. They did not clinically analyze the enemy's tactical failure with such detached, intellectual professionalism. "What final solution do you propose, human?" ZY-Drac asked, his voice carefully calibrated to remain absolutely neutral. Morrison smiled, and the subtle, cold expression instantly generated a profound, systemic anxiety in every alien watching the screen. It was not a cruel smile, nor was it overtly threatening. It was the chilling, professional smile of an entity who had already calculated all possible strategic outcomes and had found the resulting possibilities entirely satisfactory to its objectives. "Here is the final, established operational sequence," Morrison declared, his tone remaining perfectly calm and authoritative. "You will immediately return to your superiors with a non-negotiable directive. Humanity hereby lays absolute, permanent claim to this entire stellar sector. Any Hegemony vessels detected within these boundaries after a period of 72 standard hours will be destroyed immediately and without any prior warning. This is not, Commander, a negotiation. The sheer audacity of the words struck the alien fleet with a concentrated, paralyzing force. In 3 millennia of total, unchallenged conquest, no power had ever presumed to issue the Hegemony an ultimatum. They were the authors of demands. They were the arbiters of all deadlines. You are but one solitary vessel against the collective might of the Hegemony, ZY-Drac desperately retorted, falling back on the ingrained certainty that had served his people for millennia. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Our coordinated fleets number in the high hundreds. You cannot possibly endure against such overwhelming power. Morrison's final response was immediate, delivered with the absolute, unwavering confidence that was the inherent hallmark of humanity's ruthless expansion into the void. Then, Commander, you should be fully capable of recognizing precisely what conquest looks like. The simple, definitive statement carried an existential weight far greater than any mere physical threat. It suggested that humans understood the complex, brutal process of subjugation intimately, and were entirely confident in their ability to initiate the process again, immediately, at their leisure. Chief Stone, Morrison continued, speaking directly to his engineering officer, but ensuring the signal was intentionally routed to the eavesdropping aliens. Give the commander a brief, calculated demonstration of what we are functionally talking about. From the colossal, shielded depths of the USS Resilient came an acoustic signature that had never before propagated across this sector of the galaxy. It commenced as a deep, infrastructural hum that resonated from the ship's very core architecture, then rapidly amplified into a sound of pure, contained power that seemed to vibrate and warp the surrounding vacuum itself. The alien bioships, with their highly sensitive, organic hulls, registered the frequency shift like a stunning, debilitating physical touch. The Resilient's primary kinetic railgun was now charging to its combat-ready capacity. The colossal weapon that powered up was radically unlike anything in the Hegemony's 3 millennia of experience, which relied exclusively on biological ammunition and exotic organic chemistry. The human railgun was an instrument of pure, inescapable physics made surgically manifest. Contained magnetic accelerator coils, structures the size of Hegemony orbital habitats, generated tightly focused electromagnetic fields so monstrously powerful that they created detectable, localized gravitational distortions. The full kinetic charging process consumed precisely 30 seconds. 30 protracted seconds during which every alien in the entire fleet watched their organic senses register sheer, raw energy levels that utterly defied their belief frameworks. The human ship was deliberately preparing to fire a single kinetic weapon that drew a thermodynamic yield greater than the sustainable output of entire Hegemony orbital battle stations. Sir, Valet Kale reported with unwavering calm. Main rail gun fully charged and ready to discharge. Inertial target acquired and locked. Morrison nodded once to his tactical officer. Fire! The rail gun discharged with a blinding, immediate flash of coherent light that momentarily rivaled the output of the local star. A solid tungsten penetrator rod, weighing multiple tons, was instantly accelerated to a calculated, significant fraction of light speed within the accelerator's few hundred meters of bore. The projectile then streaked between the two static fleets, tracing an invisible, perfect trajectory toward its designated inert target, a large, unmoving asteroid located kilometers away in the distance. The resulting impact was visible even to the unprotected human eye. The asteroid, a massive, solid chunk of rock, ice, and metal several kilometers in diameter, simply ceased to possess a meaningful existence. One moment the millennia-old geological feature was present, solid, and permanent. The next, it was nothing more than a rapidly expanding, incandescent cloud of superheated plasma, glowing with the terrifying intensity of a newborn, temporary stellar remnant. The demonstration was profound and perfect in its mathematical simplicity. There were no exotic biological weapons, no mysterious gravitational manipulators, and no baffling technology, only pure kinetic energy, applied with overwhelming, relativistic force and devastating precision. The aliens watched their organic sensors attempt to calculate the sheer magnitude of force required to achieve such total, instantaneous destruction, and found the resulting computational data to be existentially meaningless. Kinetic energy, Morrison explained conversationally to the profoundly stunned alien fleet. We find the methodology exceptionally reliable. The simple, cool understatement fractured something vital in the collective minds of the Hegemony commanders. They had just been forced to witness the casual, clinical destruction of a solid asteroid larger than several of their manned orbital space stations, a feat of raw power delivered by a weapon system that the humans dismissively classified as merely reliable. Commander ZY Drax stared at the expanding, incandescent plasma cloud that had only moments before been solid, permanent matter, and felt the last, brittle remnants of his ingrained confidence crumble into cosmic dust. The humans had not merely demonstrated superior, localized firepower. They had demonstrated a conceptual, terrifying level of technological sophistication that rendered all Hegemony-evolved weaponry functionally primitive by cold, objective comparison. Commander, Grokar whispered, the single word thick with final, unquestionable defeat. We must immediately withdraw. This is not a battle that our species possesses the capacity to win. For the first time in his exceptionally long military career, ZY Drax instantly, unconditionally agreed with the assessment for immediate retreat. Yet, he was still an intrinsically professional soldier, and he simultaneously understood the devastating, geopolitical implications of the demonstration he had just witnessed. Human Captain, he transmitted, his voice heavy with the crushing weight of total, unavoidable defeat. Your authoritative message will be delivered to the Hegemony. Morrison nodded, his expression conveying professional satisfaction. I suspected as much. You have precisely 72 standard hours to evacuate the claimed sector, Commander. I strongly advise you to utilize that time efficiently and wisely. The Hegemony fleet began its slow, cumbersome rotation away from the claimed human territory, their once graceful bioships moving without any of their characteristic, ingrained confidence. As they initiated the complex process to activate their jump drive organs for faster-than-light travel, Morrison's voice penetrated their receiving sensory clusters one final, devastating time. Commander ZY Drax, the human captain said, his tone almost chillingly friendly. When you deliver your report to your superiors, ensure they process and understand one essential, core data point. The vessel you encountered was merely a standardized patrol cruiser. We possess demonstrably much larger vessels if the tactical situation ever genuinely requires them. The communication was permanently terminated, leaving the alien fleet to helplessly contemplate the terrifying, impossible implications of the data as they fled desperately toward their home cluster. If the Resilient, that mountainous kinetic fortress, was merely a patrol vessel, what in the dark, silent void did the human battle fleets truly look like? As the biocruisers initiated their jump drive organs and disappeared into the complex distortion of hyperspace, Captain Morrison turned back to his tactical officer. Valet, based on their psychological profile, do you assess a return engagement? Lieutenant Kale paused, thoughtfully calculating the Hegemony's probable response. Seriously, sir? They will absolutely be back. But next time, they will commit every single tactical resource they possess. Morrison smiled slightly, the expression completely unburdened, and settled back into his command chair. That, he stated simply, should prove significantly more interesting. On the command deck of the USS Resilient, the highly trained crew immediately returned to their routine patrol duties. They had just fundamentally altered the geopolitical balance of power across an entire massive sector of the galaxy. Yet for them, it was merely another successful, routine day of executing their assigned operational duties. In the vast, silent depths of space, the immense, superheated plasma cloud that had once been a solid asteroid continued its slow, inexorable expansion, a glowing, terrible testament to the raw physics of kinetic annihilation, and a permanent, visible reminder of the devastating force that results when humanity decides to make a point. The galaxy, in that silent moment, became an irreversibly different place.